When the conversation comes up about who is the greatest of all time, when discussing the greatest of all time in English, several names are mentioned, including John Jones and my beloved, according to some, George St-Pierre Khabib, Ronda Rousey, or Anderson Silva, each with their own merits to be mentioned in the discussion. We already have stories about all these examples on the channel, but there's one name that many fans leave out. He has truly earned his place in this conversation. Not only for being one of the most dominant UFC champions, but also because the UFC itself has tried to erase him from history. And there aren't many people you can say that about. As far as I know, there are 2 champions that's happened to. One is Francis Ngannou, the last video on the channel and who we welcome today to the Aikiverse. To one of the most dominant fighters in all of history, whose life and career are worthy of admiration. Today we welcome Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Krishna Johnson. He was born on August 13, 1986 in Madisonville, Kentucky, United States. But when we say he was born, we should clarify that he was lucky to be born since his birth was premature, which in a way had an impact. Since, as many of you know, Demetrius is a small guy, he's short in height. Well, according to Demetrius' own words, this is because of his premature birth. With this, we can already see that the protagonist of today's story has literally been fighting since he came into the world. His mother, Karen Johnson, was abandoned by Demetrius' father, who went out to buy milk and never came back. His mother was with several men during Demetrius' childhood, and according to what little Demetrius remembered, all these male figures were military men who were not exactly affectionate. But in the end, she stays with one. One whose name we've tried to find out, but I assure you, I haven't found any way to know what he's called.
My name is Cosme Fulanito.
This last man becomes the stepfather of the protagonist and his siblings. But, as expected, the draconian discipline of the army makes itself felt at home with his stepfather, punishing them by making them stare at a corner when he was in a good mood and beating them when he was in a bad mood. Since I believe this is not what a father should do, I'm taking away 1 intelligence quotient point from him, leaving him with -1. Despite this mistreatment, and in his own words, yes, I had an abusive father, but I can't say I had a bad childhood. There were always good times, both with my mom and with my siblings. Since childhood, Johnson was drawn to sports, including football, track and field, and wrestling. One of the few things he could share with his stepfather was when he sat in front of the television to watch mixed martial arts fights, but not UFC, instead the best promotion in the world, Prime Fight Championship. And I think there's no doubt that here I have to give an EQ point to Demetrius' father, so he stays with 0. As Demetrius himself said, he really liked the promotion and it caught his attention. And that's normal because, I mean, look at this. His excellence in sports. With his academic achievements, good old Demetrius was what we could call a brainiac excelling at school. At 14, he discovers something. His mother, who has always supported him, was deaf. She had developed an incredible ability to read lips. So much so that she says at first she didn't believe her, but her mother told her that she was indeed deaf. She didn't want to be treated as disabled, and that's why she made such an effort. And this marked a young man, Demetrius, who says that seeing his mother's effort not to be looked down on made him understand that by working hard, anything could be achieved. Eventually, he stops training. He struggles since he had started college and wanted to get good grades, so he decided to sacrifice sports for the sake of his grades. But one day, while watching television, he sees one of these sports programs, and in it is a fighter, Rashad Evans, and he was able to see a bit of his training. The little he saw was enough to know that he was going to like it. In those years, he says there were few mixed martial arts academies, so he started training on his own. One day, a local fighter noticed his talent and invited him to join the academy where he trained. This gym is AMC Pankration, and after just 3 months there at the gym, and given his clear commitment and skills, he starts his amateur career, where he wins his 9 fights, 5 by submission, 2 by knockout, and 2 by decision. In view of this and the fact that it was time to start making money, he turns professional. But it should be clarified that at that time, our protagonist divided his time between jobs, usually construction for the pay, university, and the gym. Given his success as an amateur, he told his mother he would try to build a career out of it. His mother didn't turn a deaf ear and supported him. Hey! Aren't you laughing? On August 15th, 2019, he won his first professional fight against Frankie Mendes A in the first round by rear naked choke. After this fight, does he go on to fight in Alaska Fighting Championship or Alaska Fighting Championship? Should it be said that he did this specifically for money? And as you may know, Alaska has a climate with below zero temperatures during some seasons of the year. So the Alaska Fighting Championship had to pay high wages for that level of competition to attract talent. In Alaska Fighting Championship, Demetrius gets 2 wins, one against Marshall Carlisle and the other against Jesse Brooks. He defeats the first by technical knockout and the second with a stunning head kick knockout. Those 2 victories earned him a contract with World Stream Cage Fighting, a promotion that saw the rise of many legends of the sport like Jose Aldo, Durilla, Faber, or Anthony Pettis. But his start wasn't the best, since he had to face Brad Pickett and was defeated by unanimous decision. But sometimes, there's no better motivator than defeat, and he comes back strong, earning 2 consecutive victories in WEC. One against Nick Pace, whom he defeats by decision, and another against Damasio Page, whom he defeats by guillotine. But by that time, the alopecia shark, the most shark-like and most alopecia in mixed martial arts, decided to buy WEC, moving the entire roster of fighters to the UFC. Among them was Demetrius. And who would have thought that in this promotion he would have his best and worst moments as a fighter?
Yes, no.
In UFC, he starts off on the right foot. First, he defeats Norifumi Kit Yamamoto and then Miguel Torres, both by unanimous decision. He then faces a real test by challenging Dominic Cruz for the bantamweight title. But Cruz, with a good strategy and even better performance, manages to win by unanimous decision. After this loss, he has another fight, which is declared a majority draw, so he is quickly scheduled again. And in the second fight, Johnson wins by unanimous decision. It should be noted that the UFC was looking for the champion of the new weight class, Flyweight. After this victory, he faces Joseph Benavidez and both fighters went all out. But in the end, our protagonist wins by split decision and therefore becomes the first UFC flyweight champion. But you know, you're not a champion until you defend, and Johnson definitely knew how to defend his title. And many of you might be wondering, but why do they call him Mike T. Mouse? Well, I'm gonna tell you, but later on. In 1 year, he has 3 fights. First, he beats Joe Dodson by unanimous decision. Next, he submits John Moraga with an armbar. Finally, he faces Joseph Benavidez again, knocking him out with a spectacular strike followed by more on the canvas. In 2014, he only has 2 fights. One against the Russian Ali Bagotinov, whom he defeats by decision, and one against Chris Carriazo, whom he submits with a Kimura. He starts 2015 on the right foot, defeating Kyoji Origuchi, whom he finishes with an armbar, and then once again dispatches Judd Johnson by unanimous decision. All these fights were title defenses, you have to keep that in mind. In 2016, he starts off fighting a guy you've asked me a lot to make a video about, but honestly I just can't be bothered. Henry Cejudo, a fighter our protagonist defeats with some beautiful knees and strikes. He beats Tim Elliott by unanimous decision, and then comes 2017. And this is where the problem with the UFC begins, but we'll get to that soon. That year, he defends his title against Wilson Reyes, winning by armbar, and months later leaves us a legacy for the ages. One of the best, if not the best, submissions in UFC history. He defends his title against Ray Bourne, whom, after taking his back, he takes down and catches with an armbar in midair, submitting him as they hit the ground. When they asked him how he did it, he answered naturally, saying, "Well, I do it all the time in the gym. Damn." At this point, Johnson has already been champion for almost 5 full years, defending his title 11 times, breaking Anderson Silva's record. And this is where the drama begins. And the thing is, the bald shark was too busy with the golden goose, Conor McGregor.
Mom.
And had he forgotten the fact that he had one of the most dominant champions in all of history? Johnson, who despite being a champion, was making money like just another fighter, while other fighters who weren't champions had pay-per-view deals. Dana would respond that money talks, that he didn't sell, that he wasn't entertaining, and that the fans didn't like him. I don't know what you guys think, but I believe that Johnson is actually one of the most entertaining fighters to watch. But, well, this is just my personal opinion. Johnson admits he avoids conflicts, which is why he stayed far from the negotiations. But every time he expressed his dissatisfaction with his pay, Dana would reply, "Aren't you bringing in money?" And in fact, we're thinking about eliminating the category. Shark negotiation techniques, what's going on? Johnson, already a father of 2, renegotiated his contract and secured something he had truly desired. But his discontent becomes public, and he doesn't hesitate to tell any media outlet that he's being mistreated as a champion. But Dana doesn't back down and starts appearing in the media, directly attacking Johnson. The good thing for him is that there was a clause to terminate the contract and that he had discussed it with his agent. And since they couldn't get what they wanted, a clause had been added that allowed him to explore other options. On August 4th, 2018, for the first time he gets a percentage of the pay-per-view and faces Henry Cejudo again. This fight ends with a controversial split decision, although Johnson himself later said that, well, he knew he had lost and that he was okay with the decision. Now that he was no longer champion, UFC made what they considered an excellent move. Did they want to get rid of Johnson? Ben Askren dominated his One Fighting Championship division and aimed to join the U Fighting Championship. Dana saw in Askren things that he loved and couldn't find in Johnson. Askren talked trash non-stop, and at least up to that point, he was an extremely dominant guy. This translates into money.
Money.
So, for the first time in history, wrestlers are exchanged between companies. Johnson for Askren. Dana thought it was impressive, but it didn't work out. In the end, Johnson was the sole winner from this situation. As for Askren, you're already aware of how that story concluded. What? You don't know, damn insect? Here's the video, in case you want to watch it. Once he arrives at One Fighting Championship, Johnson finds himself in a completely different environment. This promotion doesn't pressure him to face anyone or do anything. He compares it to a marriage. They give me options with explanations. I decide if the proposal is good. And besides, with the level of pay, I'm more than happy. He begins his journey in One Fighting Championship facing Yuya Wakamatsu, a fighter who managed to reach the second round, but ends up being submitted by a guillotine. After this, he faces Tatsumi Tsubada-A, whom he defeated by unanimous decision, and then repeats the feat by dispatching Danny Kinga, also by unanimous decision. The Asian Shark of One, Chatri Shijotong, who is not only a shark in fights, but is also an expert in Muay Thai. With more than 30 fights and a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he offers him the opportunity to fight for the championship title in the Flyweight category. Does he accept the challenge as a real man? And on April 7th, 2021, he faces the Brazilian fighter Adriano Moraes, who came in with a solid 18-3 record. But the fight is intense, with good moments for both fighters. At 2:24 in the second round, Moraes
Delivers it to him.
First, a punch drops him, followed by a knee to the groin. He finishes him off with more punches. This knee strike, it must be said, was not allowed under the old rules he came from. Johnson loses his title with a defeat, and moreover, this is the first time someone has managed to knock him out. What do you think One Fighting Championship will decide to do with him? Punish, sideline, or lower his pay? Well, they offer him the Muay Thai World title held by the extremely dangerous Rocktan Jitu Muangong, the fighter. Rest assured that at some point we'll make history with him. Johnson decides to pass on the opportunity since he believes that there are other fighters who have trained their whole lives for it, and it would be wrong of him to cut in line. The people from One then ask him, but it's okay, right? You fight for the title, but do you fight against him? And he accepts. And from there, a hybrid rules fight is set up because One Fighting Championship isn't afraid to experiment. And here we have the fight where the best flyweight Muay Thai fighter in the world faces the best flyweight mixed martial arts fighter, probably in history. The rules were that the first and third rounds would be Muay Thai, while the second and fourth would be mixed martial arts. In the first round, under Muay Thai rules, there were good exchanges from both sides. Rokteng was more aggressive, but couldn't knock out Johnson, who held on until the second round where they switched to mixed martial arts rules. In just over 2 minutes, Demetrius Johnson shows the difference between both sports, submitting the dangerous Rokteng with a rear naked choke, and that's where the fight ends. After submitting Rokteng, One Fighting Championship offers him another title fight against Adriano Moraes, and he, with his spirits sky high, accepts. So, on August 22, 2022, we had a war that lasted 4 rounds. In the end, Johnson returns the favor to Moraes, who had previously defeated him with a knee, knocking him out in their last fight. So Johnson, after stunning him with some punches, follows him, and in a sequence worthy of a movie, this happens. This knee crashes the Brazilian's windows, who falls as his soul leaves his body. Johnson thus gets 2 things, his well-deserved revenge and the champion title. But this story wasn't over, they were tied 1-1. So this would become one of the great trilogies of mixed martial arts, this time in One Fighting Championship. So Chatri's Asian Shark. In this fight, both fighters came out with a certain degree of caution, aware of the danger each one represented. But after this, and after 5 rounds of action, Demetrius takes the victory, closing the trilogy on a high note. As of the date of this video, Demetrius is 36 years old, and for now at least he is far from knowing what defeat is. He is married with 2 kids. He considers his wife, who has been with him since his teens, the best thing that ever happened to him. And both of them had complicated childhoods. Did you find a good Johnson? He has forgiven his stepfather, saying that despite the beatings, he served as motivation for him. Well, and as he himself says, it was his decision to hit us and hurt us. At the same time, he showed me everything I shouldn't be with my children and wife. Dana White thought removing him from the UFC and attempting to erase his legacy would make it vanish. In truth, they released him and he secured a promoter, where talent seemingly outweighs one's ability to spew nonsense. For those just beginning to discover the origin of his nickname, this is it. When he began training, he was the smallest in the class, yet one of the strongest. This, along with his ears, which were growing larger due to the beloved and hated cauliflower ears. One day his coach nicknamed him Mighty Mouse, small, strong, and big-eared. And you know how nicknames go. They always, or at least almost always, stick, even if you don't like them. And Johnson doesn't like his. Initially, he overlooked it, but upon reflection, he confesses that being called Mouse isn't very appealing to him. That's why he tries to get people to use only Mighty, meaning powerful. Well, but it's been years living with the nickname and he says he's learned to live with it. With a 25-4-1 record, he holds this spot on the list of pure mixed martial arts victories. And also, he has the honor and privilege of making it to the podium, taking 2nd place on our list of fantastic bald guys. Volume 2 in 2nd place. Despite having been rivals and not being able to stand him for quite some time, nowadays he trains with Henry Cejudo, from whom he admits he has managed to learn a thing or two. He's also a YouTuber and dedicated gamer with his own team who does streaming. Recently, I covered the rise and fall of Ronnie Coleman. I believe this creature also merits inclusion on the list. I ranked him 10th because I'm not very interested in bodybuilding. Johnson is another one of those great examples of fighters who had a tough childhood marked by poverty and hardship. Despite the challenges, he overcame the cycle and achieved success. Not only an excellent fighter, but also an excellent father, in my opinion, from what I've seen while making the story, a good person. No matter how much the irate Danaway tries to diminish his legacy and has even tried to erase him from history. Ultimately, he was only kicked out of UFC after finding the respect and pay he sought within the organization. Somewhere else, if he's the greatest of all time overall, it's hard to say since there are so many variables involved. I'll leave that up to you, but that he's the best flyweight in the world, like John Jones said, that's not up for debate. Johnson is, for me, a great role model, not just as an athlete, but as a person. Making it clear that despite his small stature, he is undoubtedly a giant in the sport. Thank you for being there, everyone.